And guys, the reality for Democrats is that they are being driven by a base that overwhelmingly wants to impeach the president, begin impeachment proceedings at the very least. So where does the Russia story go now, from both a political standpoint and a criminal one? Let's start with Joyce Vance, who's a former U.S. attorney with 25 years of experience as a federal prosecutor. Joyce, thank you so much for joining us. What do you think, where do you think the Mueller investigation is going right now? What's the next shoe to drop?
So I think for folks who haven't worked in the Justice Department, the investigation looks slow from the outside. And there are reasons for that. That's because a criminal investigation proceeds slowly and by the rules. Mueller will have a team of FBI investigators. We know that he has some investigators from the Internal Revenue Service. It's likely that there are folks from other agencies, as well as some forensic accountants. And they've really spent most of 2017 very quietly putting together the paper trail, banking records, phone records, emails, and meticulously combing through those. And the reason that they're so meticulous is because prosecutors don't target individuals. So this isn't a situation where Mueller is talking with his team in the morning saying, let's look at Jared Kushner today. Instead, what they're doing is they're investigating activity, whether that's communication between the campaign and Russia during the election, or potential activity that looks like it may be Russia recruiting United States persons as agents, and they'll investigate that situation. And then they'll make a determination of whether anything that was criminal happened, and only then can they make a decision about whether to proceed with an indictment. It's a lot of sausage making that from the outside looks slow. On the inside, it's taking and often very tedious at this stage in a case.
They're going where the investigation leads. We also have two new clues about where they could be going soon, and there are two reports. One from Yahoo yesterday saying that Robert Mueller is looking into the RNC's digital operation, trying to figure out why certain areas were targeted and whether they align with the areas that could have been targeted by Russian disinformation or bots. There's also a Washington Post report out that says Trump's legal team is preparing to attack Michael Flynn's credibility, to paint him as a liar.
Two really interesting stories. I think the first piece, the communications piece, was very predictable. The core behind this entire investigation is whether Russia tried to influence a United States election. And it's important to determine, was that only Russian actors, or were there other folks, potentially folks in the United States and even on the campaign staff, who were involved? It's critical that Mueller make that assessment because there are statutes, there are laws on the books that make it illegal for a foreign country to donate either activity or something of value in connection with a campaign. You know, interesting question, would Mueller indict only Russian personnel if it was strictly a Russian operation? But what happened online makes it look like the Russians were getting some level of insight about where geographically to engage, what populations were vulnerable to the messages and the misinformation they wanted to put out on Facebook and other platforms. So expect Mueller to fully investigate who else was involved in that and determine whether there was any criminal activity.
Is Mueller going to invest or going to interview the president?
I think it's unlikely that this investigation concludes without that happening. Ken Starr's investigation into President Clinton went on for about 1,490 days and concluded with an interview of the president. Be very difficult to finalize this one without interviewing someone who's either a key witness or potentially a subject or target.
When you look at those people that are in the White House right now and you wonder who potentially has the most exposure, and then you look at Paul Manafort, you look at Rick Gates and what they've pleaded to with or what they're facing against Robert Mueller, the not being completely forthcoming on their various federal forms about foreign government interactions. When you think about that, is Jared Kushner potentially a person who could face the most problems, could have the most legal exposure?
So Mueller's team has made it very clear with their indictments that they take lying to the FBI, concealing the truth from investigators very seriously. anyone who's in the line of fire, either because they made false statements to investigators, or because they made misstatements on forms, or because they lied or concealed the truth in other forms, those are probably the group of people who are most at risk in the next wave of this investigation. And certainly Jared Kushner has that bullseye on his back.
He's had to resubmit his forms a number of times now. Joyce Vance, thank you so much for joining us. Joining me now on our panel